to balance himself, to not go over that side. If he overdoes it, he'll have to do the reverse to not go over that side, and he may, wobble. He may, as they say, oscillate, like any other self-corrective system, a machine with a governor, what have you. But what he's essentially doing is using the changeability of his relationship to the balancing pole to preserve a basic proposition: I am on the high wire.
Change may be scary, but not changing is even scarier. Our ability to remain stable is ironically a measure of our flexibility. Not allowing change is the perfect formula for becoming obsolete.
The world in which you've been placed is rather a strange world because it doesn't contain anything. It only contains news, reports of difference, reports of change, preferences for change, preferences for stability, etc., etc., etc. But really no high wire, no balancing pole, only states of a balancing pole, states of you on a high wire. From the moment when I saw that the word stable refers not to the cat, not to me, not to the object, when I say it is stable, the moment I discovered that it was an error, I was living in a world of ideas. Very important ideas, very elegant ideas. To live in a world of ideas is to be alive. So here we are, floating in a world which consists of nothing but change, because if there isn't any change, there isn't any knowledge that there isn't. Only by the creation of change can I perceive something. And in this world we float, we talk, and we talk as if, there were a static element in the world.
Change is happening with or without our noticing it. We live on a ball, swirling with systems within systems that are interacting all the time. Any attempt to lock down elements of that process is an abstraction and causes imbalance, like the tightrope walker if he were to tie down a limb. The pathology of wrong thinking in which we all live can only in the end be corrected by an enormous discovery of those relationships which make up the beauty of nature.
We talked about Goethe's thing about the leaf and the stem and the bud, and how a stem is defined by having leaves which have stems in its angles, and so on. Now that stuff, for me, is really very right-brainish sort of stuff. And if I go for a walk in the woods, stuff like that is what I enjoy as I walk along.
Any kind of aesthetic response is a response to relationships. When you read a poem, the rhythm is the relationship between the words. The different vowels echo each other. The images match up in various ways with images in your own head. So the experience that you take from the reading of a poem or looking at a painting is an unconscious exploration of the many different relationships that the artist has managed to capture.
One of the things that I think is most amazing about being a human being is that we can get inside of each other's heads, that we can share stories, that we can live parts of each other's lives vicariously. And if you've been in a society for any period of time in which you're in communication with people, you are really entwined in a web so deeply with other people's stories that it seems to me it should be very hard to be able to tell ourselves apart from that.
The story is of the man who asked his computer, do you compute that you will ever think like a human being? And the computer worked on the question and finally it printed the answer. And the piece of paper had on it printed, quote, that reminds me of a story, unquote.
Gregory, of course, was very much interested in how the kind of relationships develop and structure human personalities and societies. The reverse of that, however, we find in torture, in humiliation, in oppression. Its link to ugliness is straightforward also. It's destroying relationship. It's using relationship to undermine other relationships. That's ugly.
One of the interesting things that happens is if you look at your hand and consider it not as a number of bananas on the end of a sort of a flexible stick, but as a nest of relations, you will find that the object looks much prettier than you thought it looked. Now, this means that with a correction of our epistemology, you might find the world was a great deal more beautiful than you thought it was. Not only that, but you wouldn't be able to collect things. The whole problem of possession begins to look totally different. It's easy to collect multiples of bananas. You can stack them in various ways and so on, count them, tell your neighbors how many you've got, and so on. But to say relations, I don't know how many relations go to make this rather elegant object here. And relations between relations, and relations between relations between relations.
Expression through the arts was considered by Gregory to be the most honest and pure form of human communication. It's easy to forget that when we find meaning in a story or enjoy the beauty of a piece of music, we're engaging in the realm of thinking that is most in sync with nature. Metaphor is the language of relationships, the language of natural systems, in which there's room to communicate in spectrums of possibility instead of tightly defined cul-de-sacs.
He thought from such a very big place. His mind was big, but then his heart was as big as his mind. So, you put those two together. That's what was so exciting about living with Gregory.
I'm interested in fighting a battle with people, who want to throw the intellect out and think of nothing but the heart. And when you fight that battle, then you sound like an intellectual.
Yeah.
But when I meet intellectuals, I find myself fighting the opposite battle.
The perception of separation, of me from you, of us from the redwoods from the African deserts, is an illusion. I wonder, what is the opposite of the pattern which connects? Aren't the lines we draw, the splitting and the dividing, imaginary anyway? T.S. Eliot said, "A condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well."
over here there's humanity and everything it does, and then over here is the other living stuff and climate and things like that. And the idea of those being conceptually separate, operationally separate, theoretically separate, scientifically separate is just nuts. It just asks for some of the kinds of problems we've got.
To believe that there is such a division, and the belief in such a division does affect our conduct in all sorts of ways. It affects our entire ethical system. It affects our whole notion of what is healthy, what is sick, what is a crime, the whole McNaughton rule and all that stuff, all hinges around what I believe to be a nonsense dichotomy, and one which the sooner we get all the way away from, so that we don't have it lurking around in our vocabulary or anywhere else, the happier and sooner we shall be happy, or a little happier.
Blake said, if a fool should persist in his folly, he would become wise. Are we there yet? What's on the other side of the garden door is total obsolescence and freedom, and maybe another sort of democracy. It's Christian, it's Buddhist, Muslim, pagan, it's Jewish and radical and conservative. It's totally punk rock. It's authentic, and it questions authority, questions it till it bleeds with the authenticity of the unseparated. What are the premises that we want to maintain? What are fundamental and essential parts of our ways of living, of our lives, of our perception, that we wish to keep intact and that we are willing to use our thresholds of flexibility to maintain? What are we willing to adjust, and what do we want to keep as essential?
The nature of the world in which I live, and in which I wish you lived, all of you, and all the time, but even I don't live in it all the time. There are times when I catch myself believing that there is such a thing as something which is separate from something else.
Gregory taught me that to be complete, really complete, incompletion must be included in the system. It's learning to learn. Anything else is just static, not evolving, finished. I eventually realized that even in death, relationships continue to grow. I'm still learning things from my father.
It's like climbing a mountain, Nora. You've got trails going up it, where people have gone before, right? And if you want to get up higher than they went, you go up their trails, and then you push on a little bit further than they were ever able to get.
That's what I was trying to say.
I said it first.
Well, I thought it first.
All right.